my honor and privilege to introduce our speaker, Doron Ziserman. Doron is a 24-year-old Israeli who had a particularly close relationship with her grandparents on both sides. Like virtually all Israelis, he served time in the army, rose to the rank of captain. She will provide us with the testimony of her grandfather on her father's side this morning. In many cases, as was the case with my parents, survivors refused to burden the children and grandchildren with their survival experiences during the Holocaust. Fortunately, that was not the case with Andrey Itzhak Ziserman, Doron's grandfather. Doron was fascinated by the experiences of her grandfather and has taken the time and effort to write those down. Her grandfather's memories were all the more incredible, considering he was only 6 at the start of the war. And he managed to hide and survive all those years. I would like to share one aspect of the character of Andrey Itzhak Ziserman as told to me by Doron. After the war, Mr. Ziserman started to pursue the education that he could not get while in hiding. He was very bright and inhaled the lessons and quickly caught them. He wound up in Israel and got a job as a metallurgical analyst in technical position assisting in science. A group of visiting Australian scientists were so impressed with his abilities that they made him an offer to entice him to go to Australia. Doron's father was 16 at the time and was ready to pack his bags for what sounded like an adventure in paradise. But Doron's grandfather quickly turned down the offer, explaining to his son, "I've dreamed of getting to this country through the roughest days of my life. I had lost so many people on the way who longed for that same promised land as well, and never leaving this country." In that one sentence, Andrey Itzhak Ziserman summed up what Israel meant to a generation of survivors. He also made clear that Jews around the world are one people with shared history, and that Israel stands out as the safe haven and home that we all dream about. Let us hear more of the testimony of Andrey Itzhak Ziserman through his granddaughter. Please join me in welcoming Doron Ziserman. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Doron, and I'm here to share with you the testimony of a resourceful, brave, smart, kind, gracious, vivid, strong, and most beautiful man I've ever met, Andrey Itzhak Ziserman. You know, in Israel, it's not very common to have a second name. And if you do, you don't really mention it except in maybe government documents. And the reason that I'm telling you this is because I myself have a second name that you might have seen on the invitation. That's, sorry, that's Rachel. Something. So the name Rachel is, I'm named after my granddad's mother and my grandma's mother. And I remember that in my very early days, I was sitting next to my grandfather at the kitchen table where we always used to sit and talk privately. And even before I had known anything about the stories that lie beneath his beautiful wrinkles, he had told me that I've been given a really special name of a really, really special woman, and that I should be proud to have it, and that it would keep me safe for the rest of my life. And as I was planning on what I was going to tell you here today, that story came to my mind, and it made me realize that when my grandfather told me what he did, it's like almost as if he invited me to find out why so special and how powerful. And I took that invitation again and again through all those years. And we had countless conversations about his life and life itself, until a few years ago he gave me the permission to write and maybe someday share his story. So I wanted to thank you for giving me and my beloved grandfather the opportunity to close the most special circuit in my life. And now to the story. So my grandfather was born in March 1933 in a small village named Dolphin, that's in East Poland, to his mother, Rachel, and his father, Shlomo. He had 4 siblings. His 2 older brothers, Benjamin and Yosef, had died before the war had even begun due to a flu. After Benjamin came his older sister, Tzipora, then him, and then the youngest sister, Dvora. They had a 1-bedroom house that was standing in the middle of a widespread, beautiful field, and the family had owned and managed a farm, livestock and vegetables. And I remember when I was used to ask my grandfather about his childhood, what it was like before the war began. I remember him shining bright whenever he described anything about his family, about his siblings and mother and father. He had many stories about him riding horses with his sister, or fishing with his dad, or cooking shishi dinner with his mother. So it was a beautiful childhood. And the year was around 1940, when my grandfather's parents went to Chelem, which was the big town in that area, and they went there every single week to sell their crop. So the very honest and loved and well-known couple suddenly encountered an old friend. And that old friend had to tell them that he's just been to Lublin, and he saw that Germans there are being cruel to Jewish people, meaning they're breaking into houses and stores, they're cutting people's hairs and beards off, they're stealing their property, and they're even throwing their babies out of windows. So before I continue, let me just bring you here for a tiny moment, and let us all be reminded that we're talking about a time that there wasn't any big screens, surely not in every private and distant house. We didn't have social media, we didn't have AI, we didn't have nothing. So what I mean is, there were rumors about Hitler's plan, but I personally assume that people that time didn't presume themselves as know-it-alls, as we might be today, walking with the provider of infinite information in our pockets. And so my great-grandparents didn't rush to believe. They exchanged between them horrified glances, and they went back to their house and their children, maybe hoping for the best, and maybe knowing that the worst is yet to come. And then it did. Another friend of them came to their house. That friend was the head of the village. He came to their house drunk at night, knocking on the door, and he was trying to warn them about a notice that he was given a few hours earlier. The notice said something around, all heads of all villages must gather all their Jewish residents and send them to a concentration spot. So Shlomo still refused to believe, partially because of the fact that his friend was drunk, But the rumors about the war already accelerated so much that he couldn't wait. So he decided with his wife Rachel that in the next morning before first light, he would go to Chelem and would try to find someone, some trustworthy friend to talk with and to figure out what to do and how to go through it. Unfortunately, the head of the village was not only right, but he was actually talking about the day after, because at the same very day that Shlomo left for Chelem, at noon, Dolphin's people, supported by the army, started to evacuate all Jewish houses, as their friend said. They brought them all, including my 6-year-old grandfather, 9-year-old Zipporah, and 3-year-old Dvorah, along with their mother, to a sort of labor camp. And the reason I'm saying sort of, it's because it's not an official and known one. It was at the edge of the same village, and it was more a place to just put them for now. And so they were there. Shlomo, who came back late after they were already taken, started riding towards that camp because it was in the same village. And as he got closer, Rachel, his wife, she saw him from far, and she yelled to him in Yiddish to stay away and to not come back, and to wait for them outside. So after a few months in which the 4 of them were held by force there, Rachel at the labor camp started hearing whispers about the Germans' plan to close that labor camp and execute everybody. And again, unfortunately, she was right too, because a few days later, on one of the mornings, the Nazis took all the Jewish people that were in that camp outside to the yard. We're talking about hundreds of people. And each time they took a group that included men and women and children. They organized them in crowded lines in front of a massive pit and shot them to death. Then they did it with another group, and then another. And between all the, what I only can try and imagine, but not really, all the screamings and the bullets and guns, Rachel, she grabbed my grandfather and Zipporah while Dvorah is in her hands. And she pointed to a small breach at the fence that was on the other side of the camp, on the other side of the yard. She pointed there and she told them that they must escape now, or at least try. And now it was actually my grandfather and his sister that were exchanging worried looks, because they were looking at her and asking something like, "Why are you talking as if you're not coming with us?" So their mother leaned down to them and she said that Dvorah is too little and she can't escape with her in her hands. And if she will try, she will put them two in too much of a danger. And so you must leave and we will stay. And the two siblings did what their mother told them to do, and in what seemed an impossible way, they managed to escape through that breach. And then they were heading straight to the forest, and from there they watched their young sister and beautiful mother get shot to death and fall into a murder pit, a mass grave. My grandfather and his dad when they were already here in Israel, they used to say about those places, that those mass graves, that when you walked near the area, it would feel as if the earth is literally breathing, going up and down and up and down. And that's because of all the people who were actually buried alive. Because between all those crowded lines, not everybody got hit from gunshot. So some people fell to the pit because someone fell on them and they were buried alive, and some got shot in the knee and didn't die, but they fell in, and so on. So that was a very vivid memory for my grandfather and his dad too. And my grandfather and his sister reunited with their dad after 2 or 3 days that they were wandering in the forests. The three of them continued to hide and hunt for food and just run in the forest. Sometimes Shlomo managed to contact one of his former friends or neighbors that might have helped him get a piece of bread or a place to rest the head. But as the war continued, it became harder and harder to ask and to get that help. And so after what felt like to them like 6 months, when the winter was already very heavy and the snow already accumulated more and more, they were caught, the three of them, by Polish soldiers and were put on a carriage among a few other people, and they were heading to a concentration camp. So on that camp, Polish soldiers, like most Europeans that time and maybe also today, had the habit of drinking big amounts of alcohol in order to stay warm. And they did the same when riding that murder carriage. When Shlomo, who was a sharp and very smart man, noticed them and started to look at them every other minute, like checking their status and waiting to see the right moment. And as he assumed rightfully, it wasn't long before the soldiers got Lucy on the carriage while driving. So they were starting to nap without even realizing that they're napping. They were mumbling things that didn't make any sense, and ultimately they weren't paying much of attention to the Jews in the back. And so Shlomo gathered Tzipora and my granddad, and he drew their attention to the behavior of the soldiers and told them with a whisper that had really barely a sound, "We jump." After that, he immediately grabbed my slim little grandfather and threw him off the carriage into the snow, where he lied and waited in freezing silence. When Shlomo came to do the same with Tzipora, who was only 3 years older than my granddad, that beautiful and kind and smart and very, very, very brave girl stopped her dad, looked him in the eyes, and she told him, "What will we do if you won't make it? Andrey is too little and we will not make it by ourselves. So you jump first and then I'll jump." These were the words of Dvorah to her dad. And then her dad looked into her little eyes with what I imagine is an impossible, horrifying survival choice of heart, and he jumped. And as he did, the others that were on that carriage started to notice the escape potential situation that's happening now. and immediately they started to jump off too. And so after very, very, very short time, the soldiers, they woke up, and Tzipora, she didn't make it. And now there were two, just the two of them, my granddad and his father. They spent the entire war together. They ran barefoot through forest day and night, through heavy snow, or sometimes in a surreal kind of way through flourishing nature and beautiful flowers in the spring and summer. They hunted for their food and they were hiding in pits. And my grandfather used to tell that on rainy nights, his father would drop them into a canal and lay on top of them to absorb all the water. And I have many stories about what his father did for him, but not enough time. So in the last 6 months of the war, they met a Polish man who had a big distant farm for them to come and hide in his granary, where a few other Jews apparently were hiding for a very, very long time. I wish I could tell you the name of that righteous Gentile, but nobody knows. But because of him, they survived there until the very, very last day of the war. After the war, Shlomo was too hurt and sick to take care of my granddad. So my grandfather was sent to an orphan house that was supported by a Jewish organization, Joint, if you know it. It was an American organization. There at that orphan house, he completed his lost years or stolen years of education in really, truly a phenomenal way. From there, he took a train to see his father every single week, even though he lived very, very far away. And there he met my beautiful, outstanding, astonishing, and wise grandmother, who was and still a survivor as well. They stayed together as whole and in love as they felt that day in that orphan house. When my grandfather saw her, and rushed to tell her, to let her know that she's going to be his wife. My beloved grandmother still holds that long time unimaginable stories nowadays for the two of them. They got married in Poland and arrived in Israel on August 25th, 1957, along with my granddad's father, Shlomo, my grandma's mother, Rachel, and her brother, Yehuda. My grandparents have two sons, Meir, who's named after my grandma's father, and Shlomo, my dad, whose name after you've heard right now. And after that, they had 5 grandchildren. We have Izmargad, Inbar, Raz, who's here with us, myself, and O. And they also got to meet and play with their 2 great-grandchildren, Agam and Mia. Lucky for me, I got to have him prepared to see me every day for 23 years, and I got to call him my Saba. Sorry. My grandfather passed away last year at the age of 89 after surviving all that you heard now and so much more than that, surviving Israel wars, surviving 3 heart attacks. And that's all while being the strongest, most powerful, never really sick, never complains, and always loving human being. He and my grandmother never let any of us feel the responsibility to carry their scars and wear them on us. Their only requests were for us to stay together, to love each other, to take care for the family, and to remember and never forget. Thank you.
Doron, thank you so much for that story. Inspiration. We have a few questions that we'd like to ask you to possibly give us some more insight into your relationship with your grandfather, your relationship with the memory of the Holocaust. First, I understand that many Israeli schools offer a trip to Poland to visit Auschwitz and Auschwitz's in Poland. Do you think that trip helps Israelis understand who they are, and how did that trip affect the relationship between you and your grandparents?
So it is right. Most of the schools do offer that trip to Poland, and it comes with a whole process. The classroom meets about 8 times before they leave, and also there we have conversations. So it's a very supported process. For myself, I can say that when it was my time to go to Poland and to take that trip, it was a little bit hard for me because, as you heard, I grew up with my grandparents and I knew about the Holocaust from them, and also I had my great grandmother from my mother's side who was in Oscar Schindler's list, and she also told us our entire life were by her stories. So I didn't feel really any passion to go to Poland because all I knew about it is that it bleeds and horrifying, and I don't really want to go there. But I really did talk with my grandparents, and I felt that when they gave me their permission, that, or even when I found out, when I asked them, that it does tell their stories and it's important to them, for us to go there. So I did, and I'm really happy that I did, because it's an important thing. And the thing that I was scared most about was that when we'll be in Poland, I would stand beside my entire class and I will stand there knowing everything or feeling everything. But all the other kids that don't have their grandparents, they won't take it as seriously as I am. But I was wrong, and that wasn't the case when we were in Poland. And it was very strong for me to see all those kids that I grew up with, that I never exchanged more than a few words about my family and the Holocaust with, and to see them realizing what I know was important. Thank you.
Speaking of the memories of the Holocaust, do you think that the memory of the Holocaust is becoming less relevant to the younger generation in Israel?
I think that the entire world is going to a direction, or drifts to a direction, of individuality and self-centered. So I think a lot of people are hurrying to forget the past and not acknowledging the fact that the history has a tendency to repeat itself. So for me to say that it really is, but I think that the that the memory is weakening, and it's really important to strengthen it. And I think that on the last month or two here in Israel, that I don't know if you heard, but everything that happened here in Israel, inside the country, between the people, it actually made me feel for the very first time in a long time that people actually really care about this country. They really want it. And it's not because they're religious, and it's not because they want to give it to someone. They just want to live here free and in their country. And the amount of people that walked in the streets for the last 2 months with the Israel flags in their hands and yelling that this is our only house. I'm honestly telling you, I myself was shocked to see the amount of people. And I think it's important to strengthen that connection.
Rabbi Yafi has one more question for you, but your grandfather was memory givers. Thank you so much.
Hi, Doron. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story or your grandfather's story. And maybe it's similar to what George just said, but you have that great story and it's part of your life. And we're here today wanting to try to get a little bit of an understanding of what it's like for people in Israel, young people who don't have, you said you had some friends who went to Poland and they had a different reaction than you thought. But we're trying to get a little bit of an understanding of what it's like in Israel when Yom Hashoah comes and the siren goes, and do people, does the next generation connect? Do they feel that this is something that must be a part of their life? Because we've been told as educators in this country that if we're going to excite the Jewishness of our children, it can't be through memories of the Holocaust. It's got to be something else. I'm wondering if you have that feeling of people that you know in Israel, and if you could also share a little bit of what you were an officer in the IDF, and the people that what do you feel is the connection of Israel for Holocaust? There are those who say Israel is the answer to the Holocaust. What do you think? A few ideas, if you can respond. Thank you.
So I'll answer you. I think it's me now. So I'll just say that what I was surprised to see when we were in Poland was really how affected people are without having that really close name to think about, or the image of their beloved grandfather or grandmother or whoever in their head to think about. That's what I did when I was there. So I saw in their eyes the really, I think maybe the same feeling that I felt. And I think that when you said that we shouldn't raise Jewish people to love Israel on the memories of the Holocaust, and we should use brighter things, maybe, I think it's not or that. It's important to do the same. I think the Holocaust is really hard to digest to everybody. No one wants to know and acknowledge that it ever happened. Neither do I, but it did, and that's the exact problem. So if we will close our eyes and won't feel free to acknowledge it and to remember it and to talk about it and to remind everybody about it and to have young kids hear about it. I heard it in a very young age, my brother as well, all of us, we learn about it in school. So I think it's important because it gives you, first of all, and maybe sadly, but a strong grip of reality. That's the reality that we live in the world. There are places that things that are similar to what happened are still happening, and not acknowledging it won't make it go away. And I think it's important to raise a generation that understands where people can go and how far evilness can develop. So it's an important reminder. And I can tell that I wasn't in school for a few years now, but I remember from my years in school that we heard about it from first grade to senior year. Every year there is Yom Hashoah, and as you showed before we stop, we have ceremonies, we have only movies that are about the Holocaust in the TV. You can't watch anything else, even if you want, even if you don't want to cooperate with Yom Hashoah, you can't really use TV or without acknowledging it. So that's what we do here.